Hello students, you're welcome to our second lesson. Hope the first one was enjoyable, hope you understood. And today I'm welcoming you again to our second lesson. And mainly today we are going to talk about the Synoptic Gospels. When we talk about Synoptic Gospels, we all know we have four Gospels, that is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they all know those are mainly Gospels because they talk about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, which is the basis of our salvation. That's why they're called Gospels, just because they talk about the life, the death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, just mainly the events in Jesus Christ's life. That's why they're called Gospels. But then, in those four Gospels, there are those that are called Synoptic Gospels. Why are they called Synoptic Gospels? Because they sit together. They have common view about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And these Gospels that have that common view, that's why you find like this one is talking about this parable, like those different things, but they're all in the same Gospels. Like you find how they're written, it's how they're written the other side. And these Gospels there is Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They have the same view in the events of Jesus' ministry, especially that one starting from Jesus' ministry of Galilee, and all the events are in the same order. You find like Mark is talking about the same thing, Matthew is talking about the same thing, and Luke is talking about the same thing. You get it? So all those things, because they have the common view, you find like they call them Synoptic Gospels because they look together, they see together, they resemble, they have the same content almost. So we call them Synoptic Gospels. Okay, hope you're getting. So now after that, after knowing that there are Synoptic Gospels, we come to start now knowing the backgrounds. They're all having the same view. Then now we start coming up with a background. The background of the three Gospels, that is Matthew, Mark, and Luke. When you got the background, you find like Matthew was written by one of the 12 disciples, that is Matthew. He's the one who wrote the Gospel of Matthew. Then we come to Mark. Mark was written by John Mark, a close associate to Peter, the disciple. So you find like Mark wasn't a disciple, but him writing the Gospel of Mark, he got his information from Peter, who was the disciple. Okay, so now we go to Luke. Luke also was not also written by a disciple, but was written by Luke, a physician, and he was a close associate to Paul, the apostle. We all know that Paul was Saul before, but when he changed from Saul the persecutor to Paul after meeting with Jesus. So also Luke got the information of writing the Gospel of Luke from Paul. So that is the background of the three Gospels. Now you come to know that these Gospels are written by three different people and getting information from also different sources. Okay, so now you start wondering, why are they similar? Why are they having the same view and the same order of Jesus's event? Okay, so now we go to the similarities. What are some of the similarities that are in these Gospels? Because these three Gospels, they are similar yet different among them in terms of the writing and authors. So the similarity in these three Gospels, and yet they are different. They are similar, they're having the similar content, the same way, or the same order of events, but then they are different because they are written by different authors. That makes that causes a synoptic problem. That brings the synoptic problem. Why? They are similar and yet they are different. Like you find the way Matthew writes about something is different from how Luke writes about it, and is different from how Mark writes about it, but they're all writing about the same thing. You see, like you find like they're talking about maybe the healing of a lame man. So you find like Matthew is talking about it in a different way, but the same event. Luke is talking about it in another way, and also Mark is talking about it in another way, but all of them, they're talking about a similar event. So that similarity and yet they're different brings about the synoptic problem. Okay, hope now you're getting. So now you come about, after getting those differences in their writings, after them, all of them causing that synoptic problem, we come to know reasons for their differences. Why are they writing? Why are they having the similar events and yet they write about them in a different way? So we come on the reasons for the differences. Okay, so the first reason we all know, these gospels were written at different times. You find like when we read, we all agree that Mark was written before, like was written after, or was written before all these gospels were written. So Mark was the first. You find like they were written in different times. So meaning, of course, if I write something, my way of writing is different from yours. So meaning, if I've written at a different time, I might have written my thing just immediately. So I got the information maybe immediately. Then also you also come and write immediately and after me, like that. You find like you have different information, but we are writing at the same time. Just like we all know, we are writing like we all know that the way you understand things, you understand differently. And if I told you something, you would all write in a different way according to your understanding. So now, writing at different times, you find like they wrote all these gospels were written at different times. Okay, that is one thing we think maybe that would have brought the differences in the synoptic gospels. Then we also find they are written by different authors. Yes, that is also another reason for the differences in these gospels. Of course, the way we write, the way I understand, the way I perceive something is different from the way you do it. Okay, let me give an example. If I tell you, write about your life, okay, you write it in your own way. I'll also write it in my own way, that according to how I understand it. Okay, so now that could also be the reason for the difference, because they're written by different authors. Okay. Then also another thing that would have brought the differences in these gospels. These people, you have all known the authors of these books. We only find it's only Matthew who was the eyewitness. Most of these authors were not eyewitnesses. So meaning they didn't get the information direct from Jesus. So you'd find that difference, because if I tell you something, you're going to understand it in another way. When you put it in writing, you're going to put it in another way. Some you've forgotten other things you're remembering, like that. So in that way, being that they're not the eyewitnesses, they're also just being told the story, it brings up the difference, but when they're writing on the same thing. Okay, hope you're getting. Then also what could have brought the difference, it's this thing like these three gospels were written in different places. You find like Matthew was written in another place, Mark was in Rome, and also Luke was in another place. So in that way, you can't write the same things, because seriously, these people were not twins, they were not brothers that they should be writing the same things. So that could have brought the problem. Okay, and now because of these differences, which brought up the synoptic problem. So in this way, many scholars have come up to solve the synoptic problem. And how have they come up to do that? Many scholars have come up with solutions. They have come up with theories to solve this synoptic problem. Okay, hope you're getting. The first theory they come up with, it is the eyewitness theory. This one, scholars say during the time of Jesus, this ministry, there were many witnesses on top of the apostles. Remember, the eyewitnesses. You remember Jesus? It wasn't only the eyewitnesses who were moving with Jesus. There were very many people who were listening to Jesus's ministry, or Jesus's teaching. So maybe also these people They also had, because they were the ministries, was not meaning the apostles only to write, meaning they would also have got their information from them. So in this way, they try also to solve that synoptic problem with the eyewitness theory. But then that doesn't convince us enough. So other scholars come in again with another theory. That is the documentary hypothesis theory. So in this theory again, the scholars believe that before the life events of Jesus were in fragments, like they were in different pieces. So for them, the scholars who believe in this theory of documentary hypothesis, they believe that maybe Matthew, Mark, and Luke used these same fragments to write the Gospels, that there are similarities. That maybe because of these pieces, they were packed there, people had written their things. So maybe Matthew, Mark, and Luke just went and picked information from those pieces and they wrote. So that's why you find the similarities and maybe find even the differences, which bring about the synoptic problem. Okay, but then that doesn't convince us enough to solve this problem of the synoptic problem. So other scholars come in with accused source theory. So in this one, they believe, these scholars in the accused source theory, they believe that Matthew and Mark have same information, which isn't in Mark. Matthew and Luke have the same information, which isn't in Mark, and so it is believed that Matthew and Luke used the accused source. So in these ones for them, because most of the times you find Mark is not that gospel that was talking about over detailed things. It was just simple and precise. So you find like Matthew and Luke, they made the gospel detailed, and you find like there are some few things that are in Matthew and Luke, but they're not in Mark. So now this book of the accused source, these scholars who believe in the accused source theory, for them they believe that Matthew and Luke use the accused source theory, but not the same with Mark. Okay, but that still doesn't convince us enough to solve this synoptic problem. So we get also other scholars who come up with the oral tradition theory. So in this oral tradition theory, the scholars here, for them they say the authors use the verbal information from different people to write and compile their gospels. That, oral, it is all about mouth to mouth. So for them they think these different authors of these synoptic gospels, they went to different people getting information verbally, and they use that to write and compile their gospel. But again, this is insufficient because the authors were writing to different audiences. You find like I can't come and ask the people of Luero, let me give an example, about the life of Jesus. Then also you ask from where you are. They will give you about how they understand it. It will be different. So you can't tell me that the events can be similar, how you see something. So this doesn't convince us in a way, because you can give an example like John Mark, who's the author of Mark's Gospel, was writing from Rome. So now you find like you can't have the similarity. You can't have how do you get the same events, almost everything in the same way? So now also this oral traditional theory doesn't convince us to solve the synoptic problem. So now another theory is the Matthew source theory. For this, the scholars say that Matthew used his own independent source to write his gospel. That is why some information is found in Matthew but not in other gospels, like the story of the Beatitudes. Like now for these scholars, for them they're like, Matthew didn't copy from anywhere. He used his own theory, his own information. He was independent. He used his own information from what he knew. That's why you find, because when you go in Matthew, he has his story that isn't into these other two gospels. The story of the Beatitudes is not in these other two gospels. So these scholars come up and say Matthew just used his independent information. He didn't copy it from anyone. But that doesn't convince us enough. If he didn't copy from anyone, then how comes that all these three gospels are having the same events, but they're having also differences in them, the way they write them? That doesn't convince us enough to solve the synoptic problem. We go to the Luke, then other scholars come up with also the other theory, and that is the Luke-So theory. And here again, some scholars here also believe that Luke had information which was only known to him, that also Luke didn't copy from anyone, that he has also his information which was only known to him. You give an example, Jesus' presentation in the temple. There is the story of the prodigal son and Jesus' encounter with Zacharias. You find like these stories are only in Luke, meaning these also scholars come up to argue that Luke didn't copy from anyone, because if he had copied from anyone, then also these stories we are talking about, the Jesus' presentation in the temple, story of the prodigal son, then Jesus' encounter with Zacharias, it would have been in other books, in these other two gospels, Matthew and Mark. But since they're not there, they're like, no, Luke also did his own things, he had his own information, but still that doesn't convince us enough. So also the other scholars also come up with their own, that is the Mark-Thos theory. So for these scholars believed and realized that the Gospel of Mark was written first. Like we all know, the Gospel of Mark was written first. It was the first gospel to be written. Therefore, this concludes that since Matthew and Luke wrote after Mark, they all got information from the Gospel of Mark, and they wrote the information more detailed. So, since these people, Mark's Gospel was the first to be written, and you find Mark's Gospel is not detailed, so we believe Mark was first to be written, and so it acted as the source for Matthew and Luke. So these scholars come up to argue that Matthew and Luke, they just got the information from Mark and they just made it detailed. Since Mark, for Mark's Gospel, he was the first to write it, it was the first to be written, he didn't make his information to be detailed. So now these people, because they were copying, they had all the time, they made the information to be detailed. So in that way, we all conclude that Matthew and Luke got the information from Mark. That's why you find the similarity and then the differences, because for them, they made the Gospels to be detailed, even though they were getting information from Mark. So we conclude in this way, in the way of solving our synoptic problem. That's so, in conclusion, therefore, since Matthew and Luke got information and used Mark as their source of information, this explains the synoptic problem, i.e., why the synoptic gospels are similar yet different. You all know that now, since we just conclude in that way, that since Mark was the first to be written, Matthew and Luke got information from Mark, they made it to be more detailed, and so this makes that's what explains the synoptic problem, because they copied from Mark, they made the information more detailed, so that brought up the synoptic problem. And why you say the synoptic problem? Because they have the gospels are similar and yet they're different. Hope you're getting that. So hope you've enjoyed this. Enjoy that, read it, listen to my voice note, listen to my explanation, ask where you've not understood, okay? I'll be waiting I'll be waiting for questions where I've not understood, okay? Enjoy the lesson.